At this point, you've already heard the praise for the Ernest Cline novel, calling it nostalgia porn or a fantastic page-turner. Or you've heard critics pan the novel as vapid, plodding, and hackneyed. That the book just name drops all over the place. Or that each character could have been replaced with a stained plank of wood. Why a stained plank? I mean, surely a plain plank of wood would get the point across, but you know what? Never mind. And the reaction to Ready Player One as a film has been just as polar, sometimes in the same tweet. But this isn't about whether Ready Player One is the death of cinema or a rebirth, it's actually about the renaissance of Mr. Steven Spielberg. If you look at common storylines he uses in his films, archetypal characters, and reoccurring subtext, you will see how Ready Player One is actually the ultimate Steven Spielberg film. And that's exactly what we're gonna do. Is Steven Spielberg a director who can cover political period dramas, sweeping epics, and iconic science fiction? Yep. Is he an auteur? Debatable. In the traditional sense of the word, it discusses someone who puts their personal stamp on every film that they make, but Spielberg has such a vast filmography. How can all of these different subject matters somehow be linked? But it's amazing how much he actually gravitates towards a specific type of story or an archetypal character, even in the more iconic films that he's produced and not directed. And by getting to know these patterns, these themes, and these characters, we get to know Mr. Spielberg. The history of the man lies within the history of his films. Spielberg grew up in what he called a family of divorce. Now, of course, divorce is not all that uncommon in today's society, but you could tell that all those decades ago, when divorce was less prevalent, that it really stuck with this man. Not only does divorce play a huge part in some of his films like E.T. or War of the Worlds, but often the family dynamic is shown to be changed or stressed. And often that involves a father figure, or lack thereof. The relationship with the father figure is often strained in many of Spielberg's films. How Peter and Jack barely have a relationship in Hook. How Henry Jones and Henry Jones Jr. barely have a relationship for decades in Indiana Jones. And how Dr. Grant barely wants anything to do with children in Jurassic Park. But the father figure can also be non-existent. In Ready Player One, the only father figures that Wade has, because his parents have sadly passed away, are a string of avuncular deadbeats that his aunt dates. Men who you wouldn't even consider father figures if it weren't for the fact he has no one else. But of course, as a Spielbergian protagonist, Wade represents a lot more than just a lost son. How many times have we seen a young hero in a Spielberg project? How many times has that young hero led a ragtag group of other young heroes in a Spielberg project? And how many times has that ragtag group gone up against an unstoppable force or insurmountable odds? In Ready Player One, Wade leads the high five. But granted, going up against huge odds is basic hero journey trope level stuff, so. But Spielberg takes these insurmountable odds and makes them even more insurmountable, to the point where this antagonistic force threatens us with an extinction level event. The dinosaurs throw off the balance of nature in Jurassic Park. The horrific events of the Holocaust, or even aliens in War of the Worlds. This extinction level event can often be much more grounded though. It can be an unstoppable juggernaut of government or corporation, like in E.T. or Minority Report, or in the case of Ready Player One, the IOI Corporation. Regardless, this antagonistic force, whatever movie it may be in, comes after one thing, and that's our freedom. In the film, IOI threatens the very way of life in the Oasis, the ultimate land of imagination. And this definitely represents how Spielberg often feels that he has to fight for his inner child. He has to fight for his freedom of imagination. And Ready Player One lets that inner child fly free. You know, that one kid that always got what he wanted. He was probably like an only child or something. You know what, that was my inner child, I'm sorry. One of the reasons I really enjoyed Ready Player One was because of this innocence. It was akin to old school Spielberg films, where the heroes may be innocent, the subject matter may be innocent, but at the same time the stakes may be high, and yet they don't feel all that dangerous, as if the films themselves were innocent. This is especially seen in a lot of the films he produced, like The Goonies, Gremlins, or Back to the Future. In early Spielberg films like E.T., The Goonies, Back to the Future, and even Indiana Jones, you kind of knew that the villains weren't going to win, that these kids would somehow get past all of the danger put in front of them and still win. In a lot of his films, the young heroes are often the ones that are more grown up. Take for instance Marty in Back to the Future. He literally has to parent his parents. And even if it's not the parents directly, the villains are often bumbling. You know that these kids are going to outsmart them, like the Fratellis in The Goonies or Sorrento in Ready Player One. Again, it's akin to an age of innocence where the movies really didn't have stakes, but they were still very entertaining. It basically comes down to one thing. Our hero is taking power away from the powerful. They're taking power away from a bully. Even in his heavy, dramatic period pieces like Empire of the Sun or Lincoln, where civil rights or human rights are being decimated, you can tell that Spielberg has these characters grow up way past their age simply because they have to stand up against a bully. That he's communicating something that happened in his childhood through his art. And I don't know about you, but I love when this filmmaker uses the art of imagination. No one who's ever read the book or seen the film will ever accuse Ready Player One's The Oasis of being unimaginative, because basically this is an environment where the characters and the filmmakers can do whatever they want. That you could show in a PG movie. Spielberg took this world building of magic and monsters that we've seen in a lot of his films and took it just one step further, with one other element that he often uses in a lot of his films: a little touch of horror. That you could show in a PG movie. Spielberg has often discussed his childhood fears feeding that wild imagination of his, and one thing that I love that they adapted from the book and changed in the movie was the fact that they had an homage to one of horror's classic films, The Shining. Which is showing another thing about Spielberg. He's a movie lover. There's a reason why we always cheer for his heroes. There's a reason why his films can both intrigue and terrorize. And there's a reason why his visions of technology in the future seem eerily topical. Because this man is a genius. And the fact is, Ready Player One took all of those tidbits of genius and made his ultimate film. It was seemingly the ultimate example of his body of work. Poll question: what is your favorite Steven Spielberg film? As always, leave your answers in the comment section below, or of course, let me know if there are any Spielbergian archetypes that I might have missed. But until next time, school's out. Hey Real students, thanks for watching. If you want to subscribe to Real School, click that round Real School logo right beside me. Also click that damn notification bell so you're aware of all of Real School's new content. You can follow me on Twitter, and of course, if you get anything out of Real School, you can always give a little back. Just click the link in the description below or the button down there, and you can become part of my Patreon team.